Well, it's important to always express our solidarity with those brave men and women that are inside Cuba, that are willing to risk everything, willing to risk their lives, willing to risk their freedoms for the cause of a free and democratic Cuba. There's many opposition leaders and dissident activists that are opposing the Castro dictatorship inside Cuba, that are being jailed every day. And we here outside of Cuba need to always be spreading the message that there are people that are heroes inside Cuba willing to risk everything for the future of that country. Every day, more and more, we're seeing greater challenges to the Castro dictatorship across the island. Just this past year, we've seen the largest wave of repression from the dictatorship going from east to west, from Pinar del Rio all the way to Oriente and Santiago de Cuba, against the brave dissidents that are raising their voices in opposition to the Castro dictatorship. So it's a growing dissident movement, and every day it gets stronger and every day it gets louder. The most important thing we can do is support the dissident movement and make sure that we do everything to deny the Castro dictatorship the resources it requires to oppress the Cuban people. And what the Obama administration has been doing is providing more and more resources to the Castro dictatorship by allowing more people to engage in travel to that country, for example. That provides hundreds of millions of dollars in hard currency resources to the Castro brothers that they use to finance the military apparatus and the state security apparatus. So while the Cuban people are struggling to fight against the Castro dictatorship, this administration is doing everything possible to help the Castro dictatorship find more hard currency resources. The policy of this administration has been to provide unilateral concessions to the Castro dictatorship in the hope of somehow receiving a movement toward democratic reforms on the island. And the reaction we've seen from the Castro dictatorship is actually the opposite. We've seen more and more repression, more and more rejection of any rapprochement that this administration tries to bring forward to the Castro brothers. It's really been a completely failed policy in the sense of trying to get any reciprocity for democratic reforms on the island. If anything, the Castro dictatorship is clamping down more and more as the Obama administration tries to give it more and more oxygen. First and foremost, do everything possible to support the dissident movement on the island through democracy building programs, just as we did during the Cold War in Eastern Europe, making sure that we can provide resources to those that are on the island to fight for freedom and democracy and human rights. And then secondly, do everything possible to isolate the regime. And isolating the regime financially, diplomatically, in every possible way. This administration doesn't seem to understand that it's important to support the dissidents and isolate the regime. What they're doing is promoting policies that just open up the regime to more and more of an influx of hard currency resources. The greatest effort possible is made to make sure that that money... The greatest effort possible is made to ensure that that money is going to the dissident movement on the island in terms of whatever resources they may need to carry on their important work of democracy building and civil society building. That's the job of agencies like the U.S. Agency for International Development. We want to make sure that that money is being used in the most effective way possible to make sure that the dissidents, the opposition leaders on the island can use those resources to promote democracy and hopefully lead to a brighter and better democratic future for Cuba. Well, Fulton Armstrong has been known for many years as an apologist of the Castro regime. He's probably one of the main advocates of providing unilateral concessions to the terrorist, totalitarian, communist dictatorship of the Castro brothers. So anything Fulton Armstrong has to say about Cuba is completely discredited by anybody who wants to be on the side of the opposition leaders on the island. So I wouldn't put much credence in anything Fulton Armstrong says because he's proven over the years to be someone who just advocates for the Castro brothers.